So I feel like the Trump administration is finally figuring out that aligning yourself with Benjamin Netanyahu, while there's definitely some overlap in interests, and I don't think any of this is personal, but when you form an unbreakable alliance with any foreign country, you're likely to get hurt, and American interests are likely to get hurt. And I think it's dawning on them that, if another country, I don't know, decides to move 2 million people by force in the biggest internment mass migration since the Second World War, you don't want to have to take credit for that. Are you surprised?
Not really. Obviously, this is a terrible situation in the Middle East, and you can sit around and say, Israel should have been formed one way, Palestine should look another.
Right, exactly.
But the truth is, at the end of the day, these two peoples are completely incompatible, and one of them is going to try to remove the other. That's a really ugly thing. Nobody should ultimately think that's positive. But if you look throughout history, the solution most nations have to this issue is ethnic cleansing. That's just what happens throughout history. Again, you don't have to judge it one way or another. You just have to look at history and know that's how these things tend to get resolved. And it's ugly business for anyone. And why should we involve ourselves on either side of that, right? I just don't understand how that would ever serve America.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Of course this is going to happen. And it's dawned on me slowly. It's like, wait, but what about the 2 million or however many are still alive, people like Palestinians in Gaza? Like, what? Well, we'll just move them somewhere else. What? No one's tried that in 80 years. It didn't work then. Now everyone has an iPhone. It's going to be on video. It's totally immoral and disgusting. But it's also, as you just pointed out, inevitable.
Again, it's messy, but it's a historical reality. And if we deny that, then we're going to end up getting caught in this never-ending cycle. The only reason this really hasn't happened, again, one direction or the other, it's not that I think the Palestinians probably wouldn't have a similar solution if they were in the Israelis' shoes. But the only reason this hasn't happened is there has kind of been this international consensus to involve ourselves in what otherwise would be a natural process throughout history. And so that's why we find ourselves stuck here over and over again. This is never going to get solved through diplomacy. You're never going to work out the ways in which you find it. No, it's going to end with one group displacing the other. That's just going to happen. And it's just not our problems. There's no reason we should have our money, our treasure, our people, or more importantly, our moral worth tied up to any of this.
But that's kind of the American way, isn't it? I mean, historically, and you've taught history, that the United States forms unbreakable alliances with countries that share its values. That's what we're told. Is that true?
No, and that's the most hilarious thing is like over and over again we hear this, oh, don't you care about America? Don't you care about American values? Actually, if we look at what the founders said about foreign policy, it's radically different. George Washington, in his farewell address, was very clear about the way we should approach foreign alliances. He said, basically, you shouldn't have them. You can have commercial relationships. You should trade with other nations, be friendly as possible. But he says very explicitly, never, ever have a favored nation or a nation that you hate, because either way, it makes you a slave to that nation. And a free nation should be free of foreign influence. He very clearly says that foreign influence is the death of any given republic. And so he says, be very careful about making some nation your favorite nation, because the natural dynamic that will happen, and I promise I'm not making any of this up. I'm not like, tailoring this in some way to the current environment.
So this, to be clear, this is Washington's farewell address.
Right.
Which is, quote, there's one line from it, don't make foreign alliances or something that is, everyone's kind of familiar with. But he goes on about it?
Oh, for several pages. And he explains exactly the dynamic that's going to happen. He says, you're going to associate this favored nation with your own nation. You're going to conflate its interests with its own interests. And not only will that happen, the different leaders of political factions inside your nation will start vying for favorability with the favored nation, showing themselves to be the true ally while you're the one who is deceiving everyone and you are actually betraying our true ally. And he says it's even going to get worse, because the real patriots that point out that you are favoring that nation instead of the interests of the real country you live in, those people will be now denounced as traitors. And they'll
no way.
Yes, it says very clearly. And so he's warned us about everything that we...
Washington wrote that?
100%.
Washington said the people who stand up and say, wait a second, nothing against that other country, but our country's interests should be the main focus of the U.S. government. That guy will be denounced as like a tool of Qatar.
Right. And this is a document. This is a document that every school child used to have to learn. This is what in every history class you would go, this is one of our core documents along with the Constitution and the Gettysburg Address. But we never go over this anymore. And I don't think that's any kind of strange coincidence. It very clearly contradicts everything about our current foreign policy. And that's what the founders actually believed.
That's so prescient. It's almost spooky.
It's absolutely amazing when you go back and read the words. You would think he's speaking exactly to the situation we're in now. And of course, you can see this with many places. You can see this with Israel, but you can also see it with Ukraine.
Oh, for sure.
And it's so strange that the right learned this lesson with Ukraine, right? We all learned that actually this deep state will send us to war, and they don't care about the boys in Appalachia or Texas. And it's not about defending America. We all recognize that when the Biden administration was calling us, Putin puppets because we didn't want to send blood and treasure to Ukraine. But all of a sudden, we have a similar situation where we might need to involve ourselves, and we forget all of the lessons we learned. We forget all of the foreign policy that we were actually supposed to be following if we're following the American tradition.
That's amazing. When did that fall out of the curriculum, do you think?
It's a great question. I have never had it as something when I was a history teacher that was required reading. I went through it because I thought it was something important for students to understand. But as a necessary part or mandatory part of the curriculum, it was never there. Maybe a short excerpt. I mean, it's only a 30-page thing, but we're not allowed to have students actually look at any kind of primary sources anymore, because one of the nasty things that happens when you look at old books that were written before, say, 1945 is you determine that the world is actually very different and that there's something very radical and modern that's happened. That's why we don't read primary sources, because then we might actually know some history.
Anything written pre-Second World War has a completely different tone that you can feel, even if they're not saying, even if the document itself doesn't say anything that is particularly radical to the modern sensibility, the way that it's written, the sort of freedom of expression, you realize how much censorship and self-censorship exists post-war when you read it. I mean, it's like, read a Lothrop Stoddard book, for example. It's amazing that people wrote stuff like that.
It's also the amount of historical context. Everyone knew the language of the old world. They understood that they were connected to a chain of tradition, and everything that they spoke about was deeply seated in that context. If you go back and read Hobbes's Leviathan, even though he's making an argument for secular government, 9/10 of it is couched in biblical language. It's nothing but biblical references, and he makes casual references to very complex theological issues that he assumes everyone is familiar with. And this is the exact same thing you see with the founders, whether it be in the Federalist Papers or Washington's Farewell Address. These are men who are deeply built into a very specific tradition and understand everything about the world inside of that. And we just don't see that anymore. Now, when we look at history, it's all these little blocks of carefully managed narrative. It has no connection to the actual lives lived by our ancestors.
Well, I don't think we have ancestors as a nation, right? I mean, what percentage of the population has an ancestor who fought in the Civil War?
Yeah, increasingly very few. And that's actually a huge problem as we face these issues coming with deportations. A lot of people are asking, okay, we understand mass deportations for illegals. We get that. But what about legal immigrants? How does that work? Who is an American ultimately, right? And that's really going to be the question of our age. We're transitioning from a moment where identity globally was very ideological, right? You're either communist or you're capitalist. You're with one empire or another, you're first world or second world. That was shattered, right? That paradigm was shattered after the end of the Cold War. And instead, we all had to turn back inward and stop having this global ideological struggle and ask, okay, now that that's gone, who are we as peoples again? And that struggle to understand national identity, I think, is seeping through everything, including our ability to understand our own traditions and understand how our Constitution work and what our values actually are, not just what's being handed to us by the news media or an educational system.
So we're understanding ourselves in a very different way. And where does that shake out? Like, what is identity post-ideology?
Well, the most traditional understanding of identity is a collection of many different factors, including language, religion, people, place, heritage, tradition, folkways, history. These things were all the different aspects that made up human society until we needed to create these supranational organizations run by managerial elites that didn't have any connection to these individual places. And that's why we see over and over again our different world governments desperately trying to erode the particular nature of peoples. If you look at the UK right now, they're completely destroying any free speech tradition. They're completely destroying any Anglo understanding of rights. And they're all doing it in the name of creating this multicultural society that England never had in the first place. And so you see these elites who are destroying the nature and quality of their people. They're actively replacing the people in their nation, because if they do that, then those barriers to the power that previously existed that were tied to the tradition will be gone.
We did an interview with a woman called Casey Means. She's a Stanford-educated surgeon and really one of the most remarkable people I have ever met. In the interview, she explained how the food that we eat, produced by huge food companies, Big Food, in conjunction with pharma, is destroying our health, making this a weak and sick country. The levels of chronic disease are beyond belief. What Casey Means, who we've not stopped thinking about ever since, is the co-founder of a healthcare technology company called Levels. And we are proud to announce today that we are partnering with Levels. And by proud, I mean sincerely proud. Levels is a really interesting company and a great product. It gives you insight into what's going on inside your body, your metabolic health. It helps you understand how the food that you're eating, the things that you're doing every single day are affecting your body in real time. And you don't think about it. You have no idea what you're putting in your mouth, and you have no idea what it's doing to your body. But over time, you feel weak and tired and spacey, and over an even longer period of time, you can get really sick. So it's worth knowing what the food you eat is doing to you. The Levels app works with something called a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM. You can get one as part of the plan, or you can bring your own. It doesn't matter. But the bottom line is big tech, big pharma, and big food combine together to form an incredibly malevolent force, pumping you full of garbage, unhealthy food with artificial sugars, and hurting you and hurting the entire country. So with Levels, you'll be able to see immediately what all of this is doing to you. You get access to real-time personalized data, and that's a critical step to changing your behavior. Those of us who like Oreos can tell you firsthand. This isn't talking to your doctor at an annual physical, looking backwards about things you did in the past. This is up to the second information on how your body is responding to different foods and activities, the things that give you stress, your sleep, et cetera, et cetera. It's easy to use. It gives you powerful, personalized health data, and then you can make much better choices about how you feel. And over time, it'll have a huge effect. Right now, you can get an additional 2 free months when you go to levels.link/Tucker. That's levels.link/Tucker. This is the beginning of what we hope will be a long and happy partnership with Levels and Dr. Casey Means. So many questions. I can imagine a multiracial society. I certainly want to.